It's 172 days since Russian forces invaded Ukraine. The Russians still control vast areas of the south, as well as the Donbass region in the east. The Zaporizhzhia plant dominates the south bank of a vast reservoir on the Dnipro River in the southeast. Ukrainian forces control the towns and cities on the opposite bank and have come under intense bombardment from the Russian-held side. Today, British military intelligence said Russia's priority was to strengthen its campaign in the south, while fighting continued over the weekend in the east. But it's not just military gains on a map. Inside each house on this quiet residential street in Kramatorsk is a personal tragedy. Nina's husband was fatally wounded in their front yard. His cigarette was still lit when she found him. He died quickly. When will it be finished, she says. There is no end to this. It's a question every Ukrainian is asking, but no one has the answer to.
Yeah, here in Ukraine, we've seen the front lines remain relatively static over the last several weeks, but recent shelling, particularly in the area near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, have raised worldwide concern. There have been new reports of shelling that took place outside near that plant over the weekend that now has the UN and dozens of other countries calling on Russia to withdraw their military from the plant to establish a DMZ, a demilitarized zone, around what is the largest nuclear power plant, not just in Ukraine, but in all of Europe. As of right now, witnesses tell us that Russia has not only stored their munitions and gear there, but have several hundred soldiers on site at this power plant, effectively allowing them to shell nearby areas without any fear of retaliation. President Zelensky warning Russian troops, saying, if you are found to be one of those at or near the plant, you will be a special target for our military. In the meantime, in the port city of Odessa, 2 people are dead, another injured, after they went swimming in the Black Sea and came into contact with some sort of explosive device that set off a blast that proved to be fatal. There are still details being gathered. A team is on site trying to learn more, but this reinforces the fact that that area is still likely mined. Despite the fact that ships carrying grain have been able to go out, more than a dozen so far, carrying vital supplies for several countries in desperate need of food. And meanwhile, here in Kyiv, the curfew still in effect. No recent strikes over the weekend. Residents here hoping it stays that way. Morgan Chesky, NBC News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
Is now investigating crimes against humanity and war crimes. But what it can't do is what a special tribunal could do, probably a lot more quickly prosecute the crime of aggression.
Would Putin himself be held accountable for war crimes apart from the crime of aggression if this tribunal was not set up?
I think it's possible that you can find evidence that links Putin directly to war crimes, crimes against humanity. But there's absolutely no doubt that Putin is guilty of this initial crime, what the Nuremberg trial authors called the initial and fundamental and supreme crime, the crime of actually planning an aggression against a sovereign state.
You've dealt directly with Vladimir Putin in your time as British Prime Minister. How
is to tell him that he cannot escape with impunity for crimes that he himself has committed and is responsible for directing.
But some countries, like the United States, have not backed a new special tribunal. James Goldston, the executive director of the Open Society Justice Initiative, explains why.
It is no surprise that major powers, including the United States, may look with some trepidation at prosecutions for the crime of aggression, given their own historical activities and given their own desire to preserve freedom of action going forward. There have absolutely been
I'm outside St. James Palace in London, where at the height of World War II, Allied governments pledged to hold the Nazis to account for their brutal war crimes in Europe. At the time, the idea that Nazi leaders would actually face justice for the atrocities of the war was a long shot. But the trials at Nuremberg just a few years later showed that it was possible.
If you were to say that they are not guilty, it would be as true to say that there has been no war.
Today, as prosecutors gather evidence of thousands of war crimes allegedly committed by Russian troops in Ukraine, a growing number of legal and political figures are calling for a new Nuremberg-style tribunal to hold Russia's leadership to account for one specific war crime they say is slipping through the cracks: the crime of aggression. I spoke to Philippe Sands, a specialist in international law. Who would be held accountable for the crime of aggression?
It's a leadership crime. It is only committed by those who have the power, the capacity to decide to wage or continue a manifestly illegal war. What that means in the context of Ukraine, you're talking about Mr. Putin, the Minister of Defense, the top military officials, the top intelligence people.
Ukraine has asked dozens of countries to support the creation of a special tribunal, and it's already been backed by legal experts, the European Parliament.
It's an incredibly dangerous battlefield where the stakes are very high. Europe's largest nuclear power plant, once again the scene of shelling. This line of fear runs for miles as those living nearby go in the opposite direction as fast as they can. This former plant worker spells out everyone's worst fears. It's very dangerous, he says. It could be another Chernobyl, or even worse. And the propaganda war is in full swing, with both countries blaming each other for shelling in recent days. This video from a week ago claims to show the aftermath of a Ukrainian attack. We can't independently verify the footage, but it comes from the Russian occupiers who now control Enerhodar, where the Zaporizhia plant is located. Russia seized it in March and stands accused of turning it into a base from where it hits nearby towns. Ukraine says it is targeting Russians